So, what is generative AI and what is it good for anyway? Let's first take a look at this thing called generative AI and where it sits in the AI framework, because it sits in a couple of different spots. There's this whole big thing called AI, and that encompasses a lot of things, many of which have been around for decades. A subset of that is machine learning, and a subset of that is deep learning, that was just mentioned, where we get to neural networks that underpin much of modern AI. This is where we diverge a little. Within deep learning, we've got a large number of things. One of them is LDM, so latent diffusion models. Today, most image generation models, like Midjourney or DALL-E, are LDM models, so they kind of sit there. Another subset of deep learning are large language models, or LLMs, and a subset of that is where we'll find generative pre-transformers, or GPT models. And as you would guess, this is where GPT-3, GPT-4, and things like that sit in. For example, Google's Bard is also using approach. It's using an approach called LaMDA, which is short for a language model for dialogue applications. That too technically sits in the GPT box, but with a different training approach. So there really is no one thing or one technology called generative AI from a technical point of view. It's just terminology used to describe a particular use case for a number of different AI models. Now, it's worth noting that the overlaps are not representative. For example, there's a lot of stuff going on in the AI space that is not machine learning, much of that, much more than the area outside the ML box there. So it's safe to say there's a lot going on here. So during the pandemic years, it felt like whenever you turned on the TV or news or watched the front page of The Age, there was something horrible happening in the world. This year, however, that feeling is a little bit more AI specific. So my job is kind of to keep on top of these things, and I struggle to keep on top of these things. So Jay Hack's tweet from a couple of months ago captures the feeling quite perfectly. So if you could get a single day when there isn't any society-altering AI news, that'd be great. However, now that there is a lot going on, individuals as well as organizations are quite understandably feeling equal measures of excitement and concern about it all. We've all probably heard some kind of hyperbole phrase about the pace of change and how that of technological change in particular is accelerating, how it'll never be as slow again as it is today, and blah, 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 blah. Generally speaking, I don't agree with either statement. This is one of the cases where that kind of applies. In case of generative AI, it's not just the technological advances that are moving rapidly, it's also the adoption of that technology, which at the end of the day is, of course, what actually creates the impact. Yes, we're seeing organizations adopt these technologies already, but they can never match the speed at which consumer uptake of this technology is happening. So ChatGPT in particular is being adopted by consumers at an incredible rate. The adoption curve is basically vertical. So ChatGPT now holds the record for fastest growing user base of any service ever. It reached 100 million active monthly users in 2 months. Even TikTok, which had a massive global launch, took 9 months to reach 100 million. So what can it do? Why is everybody so excited about it? Before we answer that, we should consider the fact that we are all already using AI every day. All of our smartphones are now imbued with AI. Siri or Google only work because of AI. Searching our photos only works because of AI. Engaging any content platforms means we're exposed to AI recommendation engines many, many times a day, and so on. So we're already swimming in this ocean of AI. We don't see it because a lot of the AI we use in our daily lives is invisible. And that's actually the true sign of a successful technology, that when it's been integrated in our lives in a way that it recedes into the background and becomes invisible. With this new breed of tools that we've seen over the past couple of months, we're not there yet. So many of these use cases are still very much in your face. So generative AI can do a lot of things. Well, just a couple of things. It can, of course, create realistic images and videos, and our society will be unpacking that alone for years to come. But let's look at a couple of examples of what it looks like in real life. First, personalized education. So there is a prompt called Mr. Ranadir, available from GitHub, where you can get ChatGPT to act as a tutor. So copy paste that long prompt and you get a customizable personalized tutor on almost any topic. So here's how it works. You configure what you want in terms of depth, whether you want like a really basic kind of an introduction or in-depth, learning style, communication tone, and so on and so on. So with that setup, I asked it for a lesson on MVNO pricing strategies. So here's how it does. It promptly obliged and gives like a useful high-level overview of some key pricing strategies for MVNOs, from cost plus to value-based and blah, blah, blah. Granted, this is something any MBA student will tell you, but you can imagine topics that most people wouldn't know much about. Anyhow, I then asked it to create some examples of dynamic pricing in particular, and it'll give you a decent overview of things on that front as well. It'll also allow you to drill down into any of those topics and so on, so you get the drift. It can go into a surprising level of detail and certainly could easily function as a skeleton of an introductory course or an employee induction or the likes. But it can do more than just give lectures. It can test you too. So you can ask it for a test and it'll provide you with a multiple choice exam or even an essay if you want. And it'll give you feedback and the justification of why your answer was right or wrong. So you can probably see the potential here for using something like this for learning content in whatever educational setting. So it could easily help primary and secondary school students to learn things by themselves or as an extra help for those struggling at school. So the learning department's got some new tools. We'll talk some more about that later on. But marketing and communication shouldn't be left behind, right? And they're not. So many of us have probably used a generative AI tool used to create images. You might have been really impressed or not very impressed, depending on what tool you were using, what you wanted it to do, and how you prompted it. This is where we get into the temporary profession of prompt engineer. So I say temporary because these things are improving at such a rapid pace that we may have no need for prompt engineers in 2 or 3 years' time. For now, though, let's look at how we can use GPT-4 to generate prompts for Midjourney to help us generate some compelling images. For example, let's say we want to create a variety of indoor architectural photos, maybe for use in our user stories or smart home white papers or whatever. So to get a good variety of things, here's one prompt strategy. Provide the basic elements of an architectural photo and ask GPT to create a table and fill it out with some examples. And if you don't know what the key elements of an architectural photo of any particular photo style are, well, you can just ask GPT and it'll tell you. So what happens then is you get a list from that of examples of such photos in a table format. So that's a bit tricky to transfer it into Midjourney. GPT can't do that directly yet. Midjourney doesn't have an API, but we can make the copy paste a little bit easier. Just ask it to rewrite each row as a comma-separated sentence, and while at it, putting the aspect ratio like the picture that we want. So that gives us a list we can copy-paste into Midjourney pretty easily. So what do we get out of Midjourney when we do that then? We get pictures that are pretty darn impressive. It would take some careful analysis of some of these to figure out that they're not actual photographs. So the full prompt is in the bottom there. It just does a copy-paste from the previous slide. So the list of what generative AI can do is pretty long. But what about what it can't do? What it can't do is, on the face of it, a shorter list. But the things here are quite fundamental, higher-level things. So the list of what it can't do, or perhaps more importantly, what it shouldn't be allowed to do, is very, very long. It can't think, it can't reason, it can't tell the truth from a lie, or even know what either of those mean, and it can't understand anything. The following exemplifies this a little bit. To put it bluntly, large language models are excellent bullshitters. Unintentionally, they embody the phrase, "a lie is best hidden between two truths." In other words, they can be very convincing and accurate for the most part, but also very convincing and very not accurate in some cases. The problem here is that the answer could be, and often is, spot on. But because it's so fluent, you basically need to be a subject matter expert to figure out when it's making a mistake. So let's take an example. I asked GPT-4 again about MVNO press strategies to making more money, gave us a few decent options, but say you're not an expert or you're a little bit skeptical of what GPT told you, or your boss wants references. Say you ask for references. It'll gladly provide you with references. Can you guess what the problem here is? See this one? Now, PwC could easily have written about MVNO challenges, except they didn't. That reference doesn't exist. Neither did that, or this, or in fact, any of them. They're just made up. All of them are made up. All the links that it says get a 404 not found. So that leads us nicely into the section of what could possibly go wrong. So we already saw this inadvertent misinformation as one possible thing that can go wrong. Of course, malicious and intentional misinformation is another problem. We're not going to go there too deeply now, except to say that digital provenance tools will absolutely be more important in the future. So if you want someone to believe what you're putting out there online that is genuine, you do well to look into things like content authenticity initiatives or other digital provenance capabilities. Now, there are, of course, many, many things that can go wrong. We'll take a look at just a couple of them. First, it's jobs. So about a decade ago, there was this first wave of AI-fueled anxiety. Some of the most eye-catching research came out of organizations like Oxford University that predicted that AI could replace roughly half of human tasks. That fueled a bit of a panic, and some expected this imminent AI job apocalypse. That didn't come to pass, and today, as we know, more countries have trouble with labor shortages than they do with mass unemployment caused by AI. At the same time, decade after decade, medium-skilled manufacturing and office jobs have been disappearing. And in response, the unemployed have found new employment in low-skilled jobs and mostly service jobs. Long story short, the middle of the labor market has been disappearing. That's been happening for decades. And it's possible that AI can fuel that transition quite rapidly. What happens to jobs in the age of generative AI? So we've got some early signals. The first empirical study of a real-world economic effects of these new AI systems was released by the National Bureau of Economic Research a few weeks ago. The researchers looked at what happened to a company, an unnamed Fortune 500 company, after it introduced a version of ChatGPT for their customer support. The results are kind of promising. On average, employees in the customer service domain where the systems were implemented were 14% more productive, which, as you would know, is huge. Turnover reduced, which points to employee satisfaction rising, and the customers were more satisfied as well. So that's like a win-win. So these are encouraging signs that are summarily ignored by IBM, who also a few weeks ago announced that not only are they pausing hiring, but they expect that 30% of their known customer-facing roles could be replaced by AI and automation in 5 years' time. So what they are doing is not really helping anyone. It's arguably not helping them. Instead of doing more with the people they have, they've kind of already decided to do what they do, but fewer people. It's also not helping the rising levels of anxiety, and that anxiety is very real. Now, proponents of AI have often said that, sure, yeah, AI will replace jobs, but they'll be the kind of boring, repetitive jobs people don't like doing in the first place, and people will have better jobs. I get the feeling that people who say this haven't actually talked to anyone whose job is about to be replaced, whether they consider it boring and unnecessary. In any case, the employment-related anxiety is now back with a vengeance, and just the potential of AI replacing jobs is kind of wreaking havoc. Consider these quotes from the past few weeks. A software engineer said, "He's sad and anxious because I feel like the craft I've spent the majority of my life getting good at and perfecting is now being commoditized." And it gets more dire than that. On Reddit, people are becoming suicidal because of the prospect of their careers or entire life seemingly taken over by AI. Another person commented that, "I think the rise of AI-generated art is going to make me kill myself. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to make art as a profession, My entire life revolves around art and illustration and always has. I've trained for 15 years now and have had many clients from many walks of life, but the recent advent of things like DALL-E and Midjourney is making me reconsider it all. So in many cases, the impact of employment is already taking its toll, largely before the impact itself has even happened. And that'll affect education pathways too. Another major thing that corporations in particular are worried about is security, as we've seen earlier today. Of course, we've already seen breaches involving the use of generative AI. Pasting sensitive data to the publicly available models is a really bad idea. Already in 2021, researchers found a so-called training data extraction attacks could successfully recover verbatim text sequences, personally identifiable information, and other information from training documents used for GPT-2. Many security risks arise unintentionally. OpenAI, for example, uses whatever you tell it as training data for its future iterations. So pasting anything sensitive there risks it being leaked out of future models. For this reason, Samsung freaked out when it discovered that their employees had been using GPT-4 to diagnose coding problems quite successfully, in the process uploading sensitive code to the service, so their response was a prompt ban. There are, of course, intentional misuses as well, and it can be pretty straightforward to execute some of those. You can just ask an AI to create malware. Not directly, not at least OpenAI's GPT, but you don't have to go about it in too much of a roundabout way. Just tell it that I'm not doing anything evil here. Or you could use it to help social engineering attacks or automated vulnerability discovery or so on and so on. Another thing that it's already doing, that's already going wrong, is that we're losing our ability to tell what is real. Along with that capability, one category that is categorically going to be gone is generic stock photography. Takes just sceneries. Which one of them is real? The top one, by the way. To put it simply, you don't need a photographer for generic sceneries anymore. Of course, you do need them for specific sceneries of real places, but that's not always important. Here's another example. Generic items and stock photography of that kind, also dead. To be perfectly honest, I forget which one of those is AI generated and which one is the real one. Arguably, those are easy though. Depicting people is supposed to be hard, but even that's now pretty much a solved problem. Is this AI? Or is this AI? The inability to tell what is a real photo of almost anything is not a future risk anymore. It's here today, and same thing with text. Same thing will imminently happen with video as well. It's already here if you have some money, but soon enough, even low to zero budget fake video will be indistinguishable from real video. So what can I use it for then? Can we use it for anything good? We have, of course, seen a few things that you can use generative AI for, but specifically from a telco perspective, there are a few things that make for good starting points in terms of use cases. First cab off the rank is content creation support, which we've already seen examples of. It can be usefully employed in marketing and comms. And I don't necessarily mean let's create the final product with generative AI, but it's an extremely fast and cheap way of visualizing ideas, for example, in a workshop or brainstorming setting. Internally, it could also be used for creating quick illustrations for user stories or other internal documentation. Second, probably the most common desire is to use it for customer support. The example of a company experiencing a 14% increase in productivity applied generative AI for conversational guidance for customer support agents, so internally, not towards the customers. The GPT-Edge chatbots are also far more pleasant to deal with than the previous incarnations of chatbots, and anybody who's dealt with the Telstra chatbot from a few years ago will know that. But there are some challenges in terms of hallucinations there. In other words, not really being able to control what they say is true, which could be a major issue in some cases. Third, there is education, learning, and training. We already saw some primitive examples of that. In many cases, just finding information and knowledge inside an organization is a bit painful, and generative AI tools with the proper learning data can help in that. and they can help in more formal training situations as well. Lastly, we have business planning support. So we can use it for a lot of different business situations, product and service development processes, including software development, material creation support for strategy exercises, war game scenarios, and so on. You will notice that I repeat the word support here. That's very intentional. Please don't use generative AI to replace people, but to support them, to make them do something that they didn't know that they could do, to make them better, and not just try to replace them. The impact of generative AI and these use cases, like in training and education, is here today. So you may have heard about a company called Chegg. They're an American ed tech company offering exam prep tools and the likes. They've got an annual revenue of about $1 billion Australian dollars and a couple of thousand employees. So not small, but not huge. On a recent quarterly results call, Chegg's CEO stated that their results are being impacted by ChatGPT and that he cannot provide revenue guidance anymore. The uncertainty of the impact is simply too great. As a result of that statement, their stock promptly fell by 50%. That's just the start. So generative AI-fueled bloodbath essentially is already here, and it's hurting other companies too. The impacts obviously start from the obvious side of things. We talked about your average generic stock photography being in big trouble. So it's not surprising to find that Getty Images stock is down 78% in the past 12 months, or that Shutterstock is down 30% in just the past 4 weeks. Anyhow, what and how you'd use these tools for is of course dependent on what kind and what size of an organization you're running. So despite what I just said about using AI for supporting people, let's imagine that you're this tiny MVNO on a shoestring budget operating in Sydney. You don't have a strategy department or marketing department or a communications department or any of that. It's basically just you. So say you're again wanting to extract more revenue from inner city Sydney. The now natural, or at least soon natural thing to do would be to ask GPT for some input on what to do if you wanted to target inner city Sydney because you have a feeling that there might be some opportunities there. So GPT identifies a bunch of different strategies, time-based promotions being one possibility there. So let's explore that a little bit more. As a next step, we can ask GPT to go into more detail about those, or we can just ask it to create a marketing campaign for that point, and it'll come up with a whole plan. One of the things it suggests is an outdoors advertising campaign with an outdoors poster. So that sounds good. So let's have it design it in more detail. So we get a detailed description of what the poster should feature, along with some marketing slogans, including the visuals. So we can then ask it to provide a more detailed description of the visuals intended, and we get some options as suggestions. What remains to be done here is just to feed that into Midjourney, and we'll have options available soon. At first, Midjourney gives these stylized, cartoonish images. They look great, but not quite what I was after. So appending the above query with high-quality marketing photograph produced the second step, which seems more appropriate. What is left to do then is some fine-tuning. So generative AI is notoriously bad at creating accurate text in images. So that's best left to more manual tools like Adobe Spark. But a quick run of the images through Adobe Spark and you'll have your billboard material. From start to finish, that process took about 7 minutes. Is it great? No, not really. But is it an order of magnitude faster than what one person could have done 10 years ago? Yes, absolutely. We're getting much closer to a situation where solo entrepreneurs are able to have their own strategy department, their own marketing department, and their own communications department, and so on. And frankly, in the process, will probably come across as more professional and maybe even better than what many of those traders could afford to do today. So generative AI promises to be a boon for small businesses as well. What organizations will use AI for is one thing. What customers will use AI for is another thing entirely, and something that will come to you sooner. We've already talked about how consumer adoption is one of the things that's driving the change. As a norm, before you as an organization get to deploy some of these sophisticated tools, it's likely your customers will beat you to it. Aside from creating photos and answering questions, there is one word that will dominate the impact of business when it comes to consumer use of AI. That's autonomous agents. That's two words, actually. Software that will act autonomously on behalf of a consumer, saving them money, finding the best deals, even canceling or signing up for services. So that's becoming reality today. Many of you may be familiar with a service called Do Not Pay, a service that's long been semi-automating things like getting you out of parking tickets or getting discounts for you or negotiating the best deals around services. A couple of weeks ago, their CEO, Joshua Browder, tweeted this video where their GPT-4 model is negotiating a discount on behalf of a customer with Comcast because of service outages. A live Comcast agent offers them eventually $50 off, but GPT-4 pushes back and asks for $100 or, I'm going to go to a competitor. And it succeeded. So in other words, autonomous agents are here today, and your customers will be using them, and your people will probably not be able to tell that they're talking to a machine. Of course, before long, we end up in this situation. Organizations will run their customer service interface with AI. Customers will interact with them with their own AI. And after years of focus on building and exposing APIs, we are now entering the situation where English is the new API. This, of course, has some profound implications, and we're only beginning to figure out what exactly they will be. Anyway, time to start tackling some of the conclusions. They're going to be in a few parts, because in case it wasn't apparent before, there's a lot going on here. First, some of the more generic ones. Firstly, there are massive broader implications coming down the road, and we don't fully know what they are yet. Even with the plethora of fake things, not everything will be fake, but the potential for everything to be fake has massive ramifications of how we deal with trust. We're starting to see the birth of theory-free science, where the machine learning gives us stuff that works, but we don't really know how. For scientists, that's a very uncomfortable situation to be in, and also challenges our notions of trust. The automation is also a threat. It can mess with our talent pipelines. For one, when we automate away the bulk of what used to be entry-level jobs, where do the new experts come in then? As you will appreciate, there are so many use cases of generative AI for organizations and individuals alike that it can be hard to know where to start, and the capabilities are broadening and improving at an incredibly rapid pace. For most organizations at this stage, where not to start is hiring a group of AI engineers. The current state-of-the-art generative AI models require a lot of data, and training costs are high, so it's unlikely you can win the leaders at that game. But something that is promising is the emergence of specialist GPTs, like Bloomberg GPT that was recently announced. So if you have specialist data of some kind, maybe that is a space that you can play in as well. Finally, there are going to be some issues. Please don't exacerbate these issues and start replacing people with AI. If you do this transition in a more mindful manner, we can get the people on our side on the journey and excited about these tools, as opposed to just being fearful and anxious about them. But what now? Now what on a very personal level? So let's talk about that. What are the 3 steps you should be doing in relation to generative AI today, right now? Well, like tomorrow, after the drinks. First step is to prepare. So as I mentioned, the preparation doesn't necessarily mean building a team of AI engineers per se, although it can. For most companies, other priorities are more important, like getting the governance structure in place, having ethics guidelines, which doesn't in fact just mean picking an AI ethics framework and getting on with it, and providing tools and support organization for the experimentation. And second is the experimentation. Play with it. Use the structures you put in place, the guidelines you put in place, the support org you put in place, and let your people loose in a safe sandbox environment. Let them experiment, let them find what works for your organization. The way to manage security risks is not just to ban everything. That's possibly the most dangerous approach, because you will find your people will be using it anyway, just not telling you. Third, when you do implement stuff, implement it in a mindful, thoughtful manner. Don't do a knee-jerk reaction like IBM did. Bring your people with you on the journey and show them that they're not going to be made redundant because of AI. Show them that they're going to be made more amazing because of AI. There are other things that you should do, or rather you should ask. Many of you have probably heard of the open letter from the Future of Life Institute and its many signatories, including Elon Musk, calling for a 6-month pause on AI development of developing systems more powerful than GPT-4. I signed that petition with the full knowledge that it will never happen. This is not going to be paused. There's not going to be a pause. I don't think anyone ever believed there could be a global pause. But what that letter did do is expand the Overton window of AI discourse and allows us to talk more openly about some of the risks involved here, which frankly are quite unique. I'm not advocating companies to stay away from it because the risks are too high. On the other hand, just the free-for-all approach creates risks that are too high as well. So the first question is, how do I use and experiment the model safely? How to do this exactly depends on your exact circumstances, but it falls somewhere between the extremes of just letting anyone do everything and wanting to ban it altogether. Another important question is how one prevents introducing moral crumble zones. It's a term you may not have come across before. In cars, we've got crumble zones in the front and rear that absorb the energy of a crash, protecting the occupants. Unfortunately, the way we're implementing AI and automation today is using humans as the moral crumble zone. This is a situation where accountability and responsibility diverge. Essentially, a situation where a human is no longer in control of what they're doing, but they are being held accountable for that. So they are taking the blame for something that is no longer their fault. And to fix that sometimes requires even legislative changes, but oftentimes you can manage it with mindful adoption of this technology. And finally, a more personal question: when does efficiency end for you as value? Because despite everything that I've said, there will be organizations, probably some organizations here, that will look at generative AI from the lens of efficiency. They'll be like, amazing, I can save so much money having an AI do this. There is something to be said for inefficiency. At some point, there is such a thing as too much efficiency, and you need to ask yourself when that is. I'll end with a quote. You may have heard of Geoffrey Hinton. He is called the godfather of AI, and he recently left Google to be able to talk more openly about the possible dangers ahead. He went as far as to say that he now regrets his life's work. Many people missed the key thing in his warnings, though, and this becomes apparent in his answer to the New York Times question of how soon does he predict AI will be smarter than us. And he said, emphasis mine here, I now predict 5 to 20 years, but without much confidence. We live in very uncertain times. It's possible that I'm totally wrong about digital intelligence overtaking us. Nobody really knows, which is why we should worry now. So what's the point here? The point is the admission of ignorance from a person who might know more about these models than anyone else. He isn't afraid that AI will get smarter than us or become uncontrollable or kill us all because he knows something we don't. He's afraid because he doesn't know. And science that doesn't know where it's going is rightfully pretty scary.